Hello, mate.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Can you hear it? So we got all the kids here. Are you ready to start now, or do you need a minute to get ready?
I thought this was going to be a chat call. That's what I was.
It was. No, you're fine. You're fine.
I could have been in my onesie, my polar bear onesie. That would have been embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, we can give you a few minutes if you need to.
I'm ready. Just check my hair. Yeah, my hair's good.
Your hair looks about as good as mine.
Thumbs up. Does it look okay?
Well, I didn't expect to be straight in to speak to you guys, but it's lovely to speak to you anyway. Always surprising anyway. Wow, this is great. I live in, have you heard of Stratford-on-Avon?
What?
No, not many people have. Have you heard of William Shakespeare?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, well, William Shakespeare basically lived in Stratford-on-Avon, so we're in a big tourist area in the country, so surrounded by fields and it's very green around here, which is not really where I usually work, because I usually work in 360 of ice and nothing. So to come back here to England and see green, lush fields and things like that, it's really different for me. So, yeah, so that's where I live. Now, you guys, do you know much about me, or shall I tell you some things about me?
I think you can still share some things. You're pretty famous over here, but I think you
Really?
we followed you for a couple of years, so.
Oh, okay, good
but
stuff.
I think you can still share a few things.
So you followed me for a couple of years, a bit like the police in the UK. They've been following me for a couple of years.
We're on it, exactly.
Okay, so look, I'll tell you what's been happening, because it's been pretty tough, to tell you the truth. When you give talks to schools, you always say, yeah, I work with the Inuit people, I work with the Nepalese people, we climbed Mount Everest, we went to the North Pole, and everybody goes, wow, that's really cool, being an explorer is brilliant. And it is brilliant, it's fantastic. But there's also the work ethic involved with getting these expeditions together. And that's the boring bit. So I don't really talk about that much. But I will say that over Christmas, and I'm being honest with you, the expedition we're doing next year is all about honesty, about seeing me as a human being, somebody who's just normal to a degree. And so you can relate to me and then follow our expedition. So the honesty about Christmas was we lost 2 major sponsors. And we're looking at probably about £1 million. So what's that? Probably about $1.6 million. We lost over Christmas. And we lost everything. And I thought, my God, everything I've worked for over 2 years with all these great companies like Lonely Planet and Skype and Microsoft and working with Buzz Aldrin now as well, the astronaut who landed on the moon, second man on the moon, all this stuff is lost. So how do you work yourself out of this darkness of nothing? It's really tough. So what I did is I took my dogs for a walk. I got 2 beautiful dogs, and I walked them out into the fields, and I stood in the field and I thought through the process. Rather than panicking, I thought through the idea that we still had 1 million students involved, we still had a mountain to climb, literally, and we had a great team around us. So I started to rethink and readdress, and we managed to get the funding in within 6 weeks. So that's really cool. But if I panicked, like I don't do on expedition, then it all would have gone wrong. So the fact of the matter is now, is we've got the funding in place. From April of this year, do you have April Fool's Day in the States? Well, I've set the date at April the 1st this year, which is a mistake. But April the 1st this year, we're going to launch the education program for Expedition 8848, which is the ascent of Mount Everest. So we're doing a 12-month lead up to that expedition, because on the 1st of April in 2019, I'll be meeting the ascent team, the camera team, the Nepalese support team, and we'll be doing a 2.5-month ascent of Mount Everest. So the 12 months now is so important. And let me tell you how cool it's going to be, all right? Because I'm excited. This month I'm going to fly to the Arctic. Next month I'm going to fly to the Himalayas. The month after that I'm going back to the Arctic to work with the Inuit people on an expedition. We're going to go to Rwanda. We're going to go to Mont Blanc in Geneva to climb that. We're also going to go to, where else are we going? There's one more place. Come on, Mark. Oh, New York. We're going to fly to New York. Yeah, there's that little village nearby you. So we're going to fly those places. And why are we going to these wonderful places? Because I'm going to give talks in schools about why it's important to explore. So I'm going to go into the schools with the film crew. We're going to connect with these guys. We're going to talk about having a responsibility yourself. Because I'm not all about exploration. It's mostly about being understanding yourself, having an understanding of your own capabilities. That's really easy, you know. So you look at yourself and you go, what am I good at? What am I bad at? And I'm good at good things. Some things I'm bad at a lot of stuff. That's why I build a team around me to help me with the stuff I'm bad at. So we go into schools and we go, look, the only person who's stopping you from doing what you want to do in life is yourself. That's you. It's just you. You're the prevention. So we try and let people understand their own limits, what they want to achieve. And so that's important, really important. And then we look at the planet, because the planet is basically your home. It's where you live. And I think when you go home to your house at night, you have a lot of respect for your family and your brothers and sisters, maybe. But your friends anywhere, any neighbourhood, your school. So you have respect. Respect is a good word. So we try then and say have a little bit of respect for the planet. And I think just looking at you guys that maybe you do anyway. But it's just about understanding the planet a little bit better. Now, I think that all due respect to the teachers in the room, they look a little bit younger than me. But I would say that our generation have grown up with, in the early days, a lack of respect for the earth. But your generation having more respect. So you're the guys who are teaching us now. I don't know if you know that, but it's true. You're welcome. So we're going to go around all these wonderful schools. We're going to take a film crew with us. We're then going to film on Mount Everest next year. We've got 3 great projects we're going to tell you about in a second. And that whole film that we do, the documentary, is going to is going to go onto Netflix, so everybody can watch it, which is great. So this film we're doing at the moment, while you've got cameras at the back of the room, is because we want to bring that in at some point to show how we connect in other ways. So that's cool. The 3 projects that we've got that you can get involved in, this is so awesome. The first one is Lonely Planet. Have you heard of Lonely Planet? Lonely Planet's like a travel company. They write books. So if you want to go to, say, China, or if you want to go to Holland, or if you want to come to the UK, if you want to go to Stratford-on-Avon, where I live, you can get a book and you can read about the different places you can go to. It's a travelling guide, if you like. But it's written by people, real people, who go off and find the worst place to live in, the best place to live in, the B&Bs, the bread and breakfasts and places like that. And they write these great, really great books. Well, we've come up with Skype and Lonely Planet, we've come up with lesson plans. So teachers, this is for you. We have lesson plans for every single subject that you guys do based around exploration. So we send that out free to your teachers. So you can follow the expedition and do some great, exciting lesson plans. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a company in the UK called Drayson Technologies. I don't expect that you'd heard of them. But they've created where's my iPhone? They've created a device the same size as my iPhone. And it's lighter than my iPhone. It reads the pollution around me. So at the end of the day, I go to an app and I will look at how the pollution's been. We're going to give these away free to every school involved in the expedition. So at the end of the expedition, we'll have data of the whole of the planet about the pollution around the planet, which is going to upset a lot of countries, but it's real data. and they'll use that for political and environmental change, to provoke change. That's great. So the third one is even more awesome because it's got an American involved. I don't like working with Americans. No, I'm joking. Just joking. So my heroes are the Gemini and the Apollo mission astronauts. Just remarkable people who were pioneers at the time when technology, that something that got these guys to the moon, the same technology is probably in this little device here. All right, it's as incredible as that. And I met up with Buzz Aldrin, who's the second man to stand on the moon. I met up with his manager the other week, and we're bringing together a project called One Gigantic Leap. It hasn't been released yet, and I've never told anybody about this. So you've got to lean forward. I've got to whisper it to you. Everybody lean forward.
Lean forward.
Whisper it to you. So the idea is that you take a photograph of you leaping in the air and send a quote of how it's important that we do missions to Mars. Okay? Lean back, lean back. Don't tell anybody about that, okay? So, and what we're going to do is we'll then pick the winner, so that'll go into a competition for free, and the winner will receive a map of Mars, which is the size of a tennis court. It's massive. And it's got lunar modules which will go on the map. It's about $8,000 worth of equipment which will be sent to the school that wins. So that's fantastic. So they're the three projects that we're doing. And we're also going to climb Everest, which is just like fifth on the list, if you like. I know. But we don't take it for granted, though, because Everest is a very tough mountain. So this is the last thing I'm going to say before I hand it over to you for questions. So I know you've been talking about survival and the importance of doing things right on expeditions and things like that. Did you know about my 2013 ascent of Mount Everest? Have you heard about that?
Details about that. No, we need some details about that.
We knew you did it, but we need details.
Okay. So after 72 days on the mountain in 2013, I stood at 8,000 meters, which is about a mile above the cloud level. So if you look at the clouds when you go outside, we were operating a mile above that. It was minus 45. Now your freezers at home are at minus 18. So it was tremendously cold. It was dark. And it was also, the wind was about force 8. So force 8. So it was coming in from the left. Really strong, cold, horrible, horrible night. We were doing the final ascent. We're on 30% oxygen. So that means you're kind of breathing like this. So really deep breathing. The blood isn't getting around the body properly, so the oxygen isn't moving to the brain or the vital organs properly. So you're not functioning physically well, and your mind is really drifting because you're not getting the oxygen to the brain to allow you to operate correctly. So the final ascent would take probably about 10 hours. And we were up to about 200 meters. There's 4 of us in the team. And 200 meters towards the summit, we were just on our own, and my friend collapsed in front of me. And I went up to him in the darkness and pulled him towards me, held him, took his goggles off and looked at his eyes and shouted at him through the wind, "Are you okay?" And he said that he didn't say anything. He was quite bad. And I've worked in the military. I've worked in rescue teams, and this guy was dying basically. So then I went back to my friend, who's a doctor, and said that, Singy, that's the guy's name, is dying. And Peter said, "Oh, my feet are frozen. I need to head down the mountain." So then I looked around for the 4th member of the team, who was already abseiling down the mountain itself. Now, at that point, I needed to make a decision because I felt okay. I'm nothing superhuman, but I think the reason why I was in a good position is because I understand how you live on long-range expeditions. So I'd solo to the North, the South Pole, done about 35 expeditions. So I understood myself and the honesty involved in the expedition. So I didn't if you bring ego into an expedition, then you won't succeed. So I stood on the side of the mountain with two friends dying around me, with 200 meters to the summit. So I could see the head torches of the climbers reaching the summit of Mount Everest. In my backpack, I had a unit to connect live to a school in California, where there was about 5 schools in there in a sports hall, with the head of Microsoft and Skype, and a film crew, waiting for the first live call from the summit of Everest. So no pressure. So I then had all that going in my head, and I made a decision at that point. Can anybody tell me what decision do you think I made?
Deshaun?
Wow.
I think you, instead of going to the top, I think you stopped and helped them.
Okay, anybody else got any other suggestions?
Gavin,
I
loud.
think, did you go to the summit?
Okay, anybody else? One more?
Haley,
Lady still in pink.
You took them with you to the summit?
That's great though. What I like about that, what I like about this is that you're the other side of the world to me, and we're having this conversation. But what I like is you put your hands up, and there are 3 good suggestions, very, very different. Expedition teams make all of those. They make those. They do those 3 things. They think that, and for me, the success of an expedition isn't waving a flag at the top of some mountain or standing at the North Pole. The success of an expedition is actually coming home alive. Every single explorer that you will learn about throughout your life have got one thing in common. From Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin to me, we're all storytellers. So the important thing is to come back alive and tell honest stories like this. At that moment in time, I aborted the expedition, so I stopped it. And I told you I've been in the military and in rescue, but this was the hardest moment of my life physically, because we had to carry this guy at 30% oxygen down the mountain to 8,000 meters. Over 3 days, we looked after him as we descended the mountain back to base camp, and then we walked into his village. And the good news is everybody lived on that expedition. Everybody survived. And what was worrying me as I started to move towards base camp was how would these children react? There was 10,000 children around the world who were following my expedition. How would they react to me not actually getting to the summit? And I think they learned more about me making that decision at that point of time than they would have done about me actually reaching the summit of Mount Everest. But as you guys quite rightly say, a lot of people don't make that decision, and there are bodies on Mount Everest that are frozen into the mountain that you see. And I didn't want anybody on my team to be part of that frozen scene.
Kaylee Powell, please report to the library immediately. Kaylee Powell to the library immediately.
Come on, Kaylee, you've got to go to that library. So this time around, we will keep that same ethos. We won't risk people's lives, but rest assured, we're very focused, very strong, well trained to do an ascent like this. But I'm going to have 4 million students with me this time, which is awesome. So that's that. So shall we do questions?
Sure. You have a question? You want to raise your hand? So.
Peyton, why don't you ask your question? Stand up, honey.
What was your most memorable Skype with students and why?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So at 7,500 meters, it's called the death zone on Mount Everest. That's where your body's got 48 hours to live before it basically just gives in. It can't operate within that area above the clouds for much longer. And all the climbers coming up are on full oxygen, and they're just moving slowly. You've probably seen it in films or on TV. But at that point, I was sat on some ice, and I had a rope around my waist and an anchor in the ground so I wouldn't slip off the mountain. I had my mask pulled to one side, and I was connected to a school in Australia. And I was doing this sort of talk with about 100 children sat in a sports hall in Australia, and they were looking up at a big screen of this explorer in the death zone on Mount Everest, connected live. And that's quite powerful. So that's probably the best talk I've ever done. And then we used to do, so when I was up there, we were doing like fist bumps with the guys. So kids coming up and like doing fist bumps with me on Mount Everest. That's cool.
That is awesome. Lily, you want to ask your question? Go
Stand
ahead,
up, honey.
Stand up. He doesn't bite on Wednesdays.
What is it like trying to get sponsors for a climb?
What is this like? Sorry.
Trying to get a sponsor for a climb.
Oh my God. Oh, I've got to use my whole personality. It's really tough. I think a good thing to take from this is that if you have a business, people don't buy into a business. They buy into you, the person who runs the business. So if I'm a really bad person and come across really rude and that, no one's going to buy into that. It doesn't matter if I'm doing a great environmental project that go on Netflix with 4 million students worldwide. People won't get past me because I'm a horrible person. So you've got to be respectful and you've got to be honest. And you've got to go out there knowing that out of 100 companies you speak to, only one will really get involved. So being an entrepreneur, being self-employed that I am, is pretty tough. But the thing that keeps me going is exploration is passion for me, a true passion. You can see this. You can see how excited I am. Just talking to you guys, I'm really excited. But it's a passion. And every time I get a knockback of people saying no, like at Christmas, no, we won't give you this £1 million, then you've got to really rethink. It's an obstacle that needs to be stepped over, if that makes sense. But it's tough, eh? But if you just keep believing, then it will happen. It will definitely happen if you're doing the right thing. So.
Gavin, great.
What is the most important tool to you when climbing Mount Everest and why?
I didn't quite get all that. It was a little bit.
Gavin, louder, honey. Project your voice, Fred.
What is the most important tool to you when climbing Mount Everest and why?
The most important tool to use, is that what you said?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Well, a physical tool, I suppose, is oxygen for me. We carry reserve oxygen. On every expedition, I carry a location beacon. So it's a little unit I put inside my jacket. And if I come into an avalanche or I'm lost in Antarctica or something, we press a button and it sends signals to rescue teams. Not that they can get in to get you, but for no problems. You need to get out and find an area where they can rescue you. The places we go are pretty extreme. So,
immediately. Kenny Parks and Ethan Eastman to the cafeteria immediately.
There's more announcements than the train station. But I think the biggest thing you can take on an expedition is the fact that you've got to be just, honesty is a big thing for me. And if you and I, the guy who asked the question, if you and I went on an expedition and you turned around to me and you said, "Are you cold, Mark?" And if I was cold but I didn't say, then I could die. That would affect you. That would affect the expedition. So it's better to be honest. So.
Mary? You want to stand up and ask your question? Smile sweetly.
Can you
I can't see you. Just step to your right a bit.
Loudly.
And come forward to the monitor. Come forward to the monitor and give me fist bump.
Give him a fist bump on the computer, Mary.
There you go.
Ready? Go.
Okay. Okay.
Can you feel a change in the air when you reach the death zone?
I can, but before you do that, we've got to do something special. Look what I do. When I pull it back, you've got to make it snow.
Oh, do it.
Okay, you ready? Go.
Okay.
Do I feel a change when I head up through the death zone? Yeah, you do. Every step is a thought, which means that you move so slowly that you're really judging yourself. You're thinking, my God, I'm terrible at this. I'm never going to do this. And then you stand still and you look up and you look around and everybody is in the same boat. Everybody is struggling. So it's a semi-technical mountain. So that means we're not climbing like this. We're following a line along. So in that respect, it's easy. But just through the lack of oxygen, it's really super hard. And it's the toughest thing I've ever done physically. Mentally, the toughest thing I've ever done was crossing Antarctica on my own for 50 days. That was really tough. I lost my iPod on the expedition. I had nothing to think about. And that was really hard, but mentally. But Everest, man, that was really tough. So.
Have you ever been to a puja ceremony before?
Yeah, I have. Before you do that, you need to do an English handshake. Very nice to meet you. Yeah, we have. We have. Also, we get blessed as well on the mountain before we head up to Mount Everest. So we have these ceremonies actually in the mountains itself. And I'm not really a religious person. I'm respectful of some religions, but I'm not really a religious person. But I think when you're dealing with avalanches and moving mountains and dead bodies along the route, you need to have faith in something that you can't see. You need everything to help you get up there. So yeah.
Elliot, what was your favorite climb or expedition and why?
What was my favourite?
Climb or expedition.
Okay. You need to wear a brighter shirt, mate. My favourite expedition. Sorry, buddy. Sorry to kick you out. My favourite expedition was. It's weird. I'm not going to tell you what the expedition was. I'm not going to tell you the name, where we were, or anything. It was a favourite expedition because I went with 5 of my closest friends who were great climbers, great guides. We didn't have any clients with us, so we were just basically climbing together. So that's a hint of a mountain. It was just we stood like 6,000 meters up above the clouds, drinking coffee in the morning, watching the sunrise over the Himalayas. And that's just fantastic. It's not just about waving flags. It's about who you travel with, how it makes you feel inside. I got asked a question today. I did an interview for a magazine, and they said, "How do we encourage people to get outside and enjoy exploration?" I said, "Well, you don't have to be an explorer. If you go out and walk your dogs around a field and love seeing them running around a field or along the beach." That feeling inside that you get is the same feeling I have on expedition, a sense of freedom and joy and stuff like that. So you don't have to go too far. So.
Sarah? Yay! There you are, guys.
What is a good number of people for an expedition team?
Give us a smile. A good number of people. Okay, that's a great question. If you're doing a long-range polar expedition, I would go with 3 people or odd numbers. And the reason for that is because the tents that we use 3-man tents. If you have 4 people on a team, you've got 2 separate tents then. And no matter how you think it won't work, you think it will work, it won't work. Because you separate the team. And the way that you bond is during the day you're working hard, but at night time when you're drinking your hot chocolate around the tent, that's when you bond and you enjoy the expedition. So I always find it's better to have 3 people within a team. Does that make sense? On a mountain expedition, I like to keep it nice and small if we're doing high altitude, but I've just guided 72 people to base camp Mount Everest. There's 30 women in one team. The biggest female group ever to reach Mount Everest base camp, which is pretty cool. All military wives.
There you are, Sarah.
Sorry about that. So, You know what I do? Let me tell you the secret I do. You guys are okay, but some of the schools I speak to, there's always a naughty kid there who will pull a face like this. And I take a photograph of them. And, and then I show the photograph on the screen and the teacher has a go at the one who's pulling the face. Games I play. We've got some more questions.
Get more.
Danny,
Some more.
why did you become an explorer?
Well, I worked for the military when I left school. Then I went on to work for rescue teams. And then I got a little bit bored because those two occupations are waiting games. So you train a lot and then you wait for stuff to happen. So I got a bit bored and I went on an adventure, which any of you guys could do. So I just picked an adventure I wanted to go on. And it was a polar expedition. Actually, it was a bit harder than that. It was a 70-day survival expedition, 70 days in the Arctic. So pretty tough. And it was with cancer research as well. So they were taking blood, and I really hate needles. And they were taking blood while we were in -30. And I kind of hated the first section of the expedition because I was really scared. But then I learned how to survive and live and appreciate the Arctic. And I love the solitude of the Arctic, the remoteness, the quietness, the purity. And I just fell in love with the environment to begin with. And then I came back to the UK, started to train people and lead expeditions, and not knowing where I was going, because I was still working for rescue teams at the time. And then I linked up with education, and it just flew then, because I saw a real connection between classrooms and the extreme areas that I work in. And I thought it'd be great to hold lessons from these areas. So that's what prompted me to do that. So, yeah.
Stand up, honey.
What is the fastest time you have climbed Everest?
The fastest time, oh, well, I'm not built for speed. If I stood up, you'll see that, no, I'm not built for speed. I'm not somebody who goes fast. I prefer to make sure everybody's staying alive and we're connecting. A lot of people who climb Everest or do these expeditions that I do it because they want to be the fastest or they want to break records or whatever. My reason to explore is to link students around the world with the planet. And to do that, you need to think methodically about how you run an expedition. So that's why I don't race. 72 days was my record, which is, a snail could beat that.
Can you talk about the pollution on Mount Everest?
The pollution?
Mm-hmm.
I think the air pollution isn't so much a problem because, it is a problem worldwide, obviously, but compared to cities, there's no roads within the areas, so it's not a bad area for that. I think to do with, in terms of waste from humans, so packages, food, and human waste as well, it is a problem at base camp to a degree, but that's getting better now. We're more aware of it. The worst place I've ever seen in the Himalayas was at Camp 4, which is 8,000 meters, the last camp. It's a horrible place to be. It sits on a saddle, which is like a saddle is built like a saddle of a horse, but it's the side of the mountain like that. And people are suffering at that point because it's quite hard, and you're going to do your final ascent of Mount Everest. Well, in that area, there was just so much rubbish. It was unbelievable. Loads of human waste as well, which is horrible. And I found some golf clubs, would you believe, up there. Where people are trying to do the highest golf hit in the world. And you just think, how ridiculous. Okay, if you're going to do that, fine, but take them back down with you, But, yeah, it kind of disgusted me. But I think the Himalayan people, also the other side of China or Tibet, really, they're concerned as well, and India and all these countries that link onto the Himalayas, that they're very concerned about the rubbish and they're switching onto it, as is the rest of the planet. Even places like China now are really trying to do the best. So the world is waking up, but not quick enough.
Deshaun? You might have to spread it closely. You can walk up there. There you go.
How many Sherpas do you guys use each year?
How many Sherpas? Do you want to? What should we do? Should we do a handshake?
Yeah.
Good to meet you. Very nice to meet you, sir. Very nice to meet you. Thank you all. Please take a seat. Is he all right? Did he fall over?
Don't touch the table.
Let's see. So the question was, how many Sherpas do we use? It all depends on how big the team is, obviously. But for the 4-man team that we're running, we'll probably have a lead guide, and you carry your own kit. We make sure we do that. But we have a lead guide, and they have an advanced team going off of about 4 people. So we'll probably have about 4 people in the team, probably have about another 5 people with us, which is very slim. But I like to work in small teams. You're more effective, I think.
Kaylee, can you go ahead and stand up and ask yours, honey? Sweet, come up to the front so he can hear better, okay, sweetie? Or Kylie, sorry, honey.
Okay. What makes you want
High
to...
five.
High five.
Oh, high five, honey.
Okay.
High
2
five.
hands.
Double high five.
Okay. What makes you want to climb Mount Everest?
Do you know what? This is the truth. I don't want to climb Mount Everest. If somebody gave me the money and said, go and climb Mount Everest, I'll say, no, I don't want to do it. That's the truth. I want to create a classroom with 4 million students worldwide. That's what I want to do. And I want to talk about the environment. And I want students to go, wow, this is a wonderful planet we live on. And I'm not a hippie or anything like that. I'm just a realist, I understand life. I've seen a lot of horrible stuff and great stuff in my life. So I want students, especially in America, it's the land of opportunity. It's a real great place to be anything you want to be. Seriously, be anything you want to be. I mean, look who your president is. Sorry. So Everest is really down on the list, but Everest is a way of creating a big noise so these 4 million students can come on board. So the idea of walking through the Himalayas is beautiful. Himalayan people, wonderful people. But to climb Everest, it needs to be a massive reason for me to put my life at a certain risk level. And that's to create a massive noise through education. So that's the important thing.
Lauren.
Ask me back, Tron.
What made you want to start talking to the kids about your expeditions?
Oh, you sounded like a robot then. You were intermittent.
All right, go up front, honey, closer.
What made you want to start talking to the kids about your expeditions?
Oh, okay. Because I just show off really a lot. No, I think it's great. I mean, you guys, I think it's early in the morning now. What, you on probably 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, is it?
Yes.
And what a great way to sort of start a day in school by speaking to a British explorer about expeditions. And I think if anything, that's great. I get criticised sometimes for calling myself an explorer because they say that, explorers only existed 100 years ago when they were trying to find new countries and new civilizations and stuff like that. So why do we call ourselves explorers now? Well, I've got a whole list of reasons why. I actually chair the Explorers Club as well. So I run that in Great Britain and Ireland. So I'm connected to loads of wonderful explorers. But the main reason I call myself an explorer is because when I come in the morning to your classroom and your teacher says, oh, we're going to explorer, linking with us, then there's hopefully a little bit of excitement there. And that's a great reason. So I think I use my expeditions as a way of saying, just be a nice person, be respectful, have great passion for what you want to do, and you'll have a massively awesome life. You will do. You will have there is a great life ahead of you if you just keep things nice and simple by being respectful and having a drive and a passion for what you want to do. Your teachers, they will tell you that work is a massive part of your life. I mean, it takes up 5 days a week generally, and a lot of time during the day. So imagine if you're in a job that you didn't want to do. What a really strange life you'd have. So getting a good job, having a passion is great. Not everybody's great at school, but being respectful, being a nice person is a great way to overcome the lack of knowledge, if you like. Does that make sense? Am I preaching? I shouldn't be
It's
preaching.
good advice. It's great advice. It's great advice.
Sorry if I sound like I'm preaching, but I really do believe in this.
That's a good
I
message.
think you guys are great.
It's a good message. Yeah.
Even the guy in orange at the back.
Sure. He didn't want you to miss him today.
He is a guide. You can find him easily. He's our beacon. He's our light beacon.
I was looking around for my sunglasses. I might need them on. So
He brightens my day every day.
yeah, of course. Yeah.
What was it like to be with 30 women at base camp?
I cried every day. No, these ladies, their husbands, they work for the military, and they find them in war zones like Afghanistan and places like that. So these ladies look after the families, look after the children back at home. So they're really inspiring people. So to guide them was really inspirational for me. And when they reached base camp, do you have Poppy Day over there?
No.
What is it?
Poppy Day in the UK is about celebrating or recognising the lives that were lost in the wars, but on both sides really. So we hold this day, and what they did was they took the biggest poppy ever. I don't think I've got a picture. The biggest poppy ever to base camp, which was fantastic. So yeah, that was a good way of answering it.
That was a nice way around.
Yeah.
What
Anybody else got a
what
question?
is your next adventure?
Well, after Mount Everest, we've got that next, obviously, and we've got the whole thing coming on this year of going to different countries. I'm then going to plan an expedition with a kayak down the side of Greenland, I think, and then I'm looking towards the Arctic again. And next year, I think me and my mate, we're going to just get on bicycles, and cycle across Canada. There's a great route across Canada which hasn't got any vehicles on it. It's just a cycle route. So we're going to do that. Because I did America. I cycled from Seattle to New York a few years ago, which was about 6,000 kilometers, I think. So we did it in 8 weeks, which was pretty cool.
Have you ever thought about doing any warm expeditions like through Africa?
Well, I did an expedition a couple of years ago to Oman, and I cycled through Oman and connected with schools. It was called the Three Expeditions. It was 3 expeditions, some sort of event. I can't remember what we called it, but it was crossing the Himalayas, crossing Oman, and I walked across Iceland as well, which was about 600 k's. So yeah, we did. I was cycling in and out of camels. These camels running on the road like this. We're just cycling in and out of them. That was a good impression of a camel, I know. You have to have a look at that. I'm trying to see if I've got any pictures on my iPhone of things like that, but I don't think I have, It's a shame because I wiped them all off. But anyway, you can look online for things like that. So, yeah, sorry I haven't got any. Yeah.
All right, we got another question for you.
Have you been injured on any of your expeditions?
I lost this finger.
Oh.
No, I didn't.
That one, didn't you guys?
Did my arm as well. Sorry. um, no, not really. I mean, nowadays, as I'm getting a little bit older, my joints are I'm feeling my joints a little bit more, so I need treatment when I get back home. Do you know what? When I left the army, I had a really bad. You got to listen to this. This is good. I had a really bad injury. Where was it? I think it was on my knee, and I went to this guy who treats athletes, and he looked at my knee and he said, "This is like 30 years ago, yeah." And he said to me, "Your knee's really bad. You've got to stop all sports now and any walking because you'll just aggravate it." Well, since that, he's told me to stop everything. I've done 35 major expeditions, been to the North Pole 5 times. I've been to the Himalayas about 20 times, Everest, blah, 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 blah. So we've done loads and loads of stuff. Just from that one guy could have prevented me from really, at the end of the day, connecting with you guys. So sometimes it's worth just thinking it through yourself and finding a way past things. So, yeah, no.
How many times have you climbed Everest?
Just once I attempted it in 2013, but I run a company in the Himalayas, and we've guided over 600 people through the Himalayan region, up 6,000, 7,000 meter peaks, things like that. So yeah.
Any men? What do you eat when you're climbing?
Well, you eat high calorific food. Every day you guys would burn about 2,000 calories a day. Okay, you probably know about calories, but if you don't, it's just how the body needs to refuel. Now on an expedition, we burn 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. So we're high performance really. So we need to put all that energy back in our bodies again. So it's high calorific stuff and lightweight as well. So it's dehydrated food. It's like crispy stuff that you pour boiling hot water into and it expands. A bit like noodles, if you like. So, yeah.
Have you ever attempted or seen all the 7 summits?
I've met people who've done the 7 summits, and these are incredible people who dedicate their lives to climbing mountains. I know we're talking a lot about mountains, but really I'm known as a polar explorer. But mountain-wise, yeah, these people are remarkable. Would you like to do it?
No.
That's great. That's what I love. No, not interested.
Some of our students are reading a novel about Jordan Romero, which is why they're asking. So, young
Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, excellent. So what can anybody, if you were going to suggest an expedition to me, which I haven't mentioned yet, because I'm always looking for suggestions, what expedition would you suggest?
Okay, go. Annabelle, what mountain should he climb? Where should he go? Where should he go? What do you think, Kevin?
Maybe like Mount Kilimanjaro.
Have you done Mount Kilimanjaro, he said?
No, I haven't done it. I've never really wanted to do it. Kind of like everybody in Europe probably does it. So it doesn't really appeal to me. I'm looking for something super different, I mean, something that will, I don't know, something different for me to do. I looked at the Appalachian Trail, which is probably, old news to you guys, but it's something different for me. But I don't know, just looking for something different to do. Maybe if you think of something, let me know. Could be anything.
How about scuba diving? Have you gone down and scuba dive versus climbing?
I've done a little bit of scuba diving in the past. I don't know. The water doesn't attract me too much. The highest mountain on the planet is actually under the water. It's not actually Mount Everest. It's actually in the ocean. I can't remember the name of it, but it's under the ocean itself, and it's higher than Mount Everest. So, but no. My friend, who I could get to connect with you, by the way, was the first Irishman to touch the Titanic.
Oh, wonderful. We'd love
Yeah. Yeah, a guy called Rory Golden, and he also was on the recovery missions for finding the Apollo 11 mission debris that went in the ocean, so the space debris. So yeah, he's quite a cool guy to connect with. So I'll link you up with him.
We love that. We love that. Any
Yeah.
other questions? We're gonna have to wrap up.
What's the scariest animal you've come in contact with when you're doing your polar expeditions? Some of my kids had seen the polar bear looking at your camera, and they wondered if you actually came in contact with the polar bear.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I did come in contact with him. If you look at if you go onto my website later and then click on the films that are on the website. There's 2 films on the talk section. I think it's on there. And then anyway, have a look on there. An about section as well, about and talks. You'll see a polar bear high-fiving my camera.
Oh my God.
He stalked me for 3 days, this bear. And bears are the fastest. Well, they run faster than a horse, so they're very fast. Very muscular, great predators. The paws are the size of basketballs.
Wow.
They can smell up to about 40 kilometers away on flat ice, so they're great predators. And they can swim a long way as well. I was picked up at the North Pole by a Russian long-range helicopter, and I was on my own. And I was right at the North Pole, probably about 1,000 miles from any landmass, 1,000 kilometers from any landmass. And there was a polar bear tracking me and her cubs, so it was following my tracks, probably half a day behind me. So if they hadn't picked me up, they would have come into my area, and I was all on my own. So that's quite dangerous. But the bear would have swam a good distance. So they're incredible predators. But the good thing we have about polar bears is they haven't seen, the areas that we work in, they haven't seen humans before. And humans are capable of some horrible things, hunting and stuff like that. And these bears aren't aware of that, so they're just inquisitive. So they just smell the air and look at the colours of the jackets, and they're just inquisitive. But what you got to do is scare a polar bear away. Do you want me to tell you how you scare a polar bear away? Yeah. So you probably need it. So I read up about your area, and it sounds like it's pretty dangerous with polar bears. So I'll tell you. So what you do is you can bang ski sticks together and make lots of noise, and the polar bear will just look over and go, well, we want nothing to do with that, and he'll walk off, and it does happen. We carry shotguns with us, but we fire around the base of the polar bear, so we don't hit the polar bear itself, and all the snow and the ice comes up on the polar bear, and he generally runs off. If you fire above the polar bear, which I've done, it's like this. So it's like the cracking of the ice. And the polar bear hears that every single day of his life, so he doesn't react. So the best way is to use a flare, a little pen flare. You trigger it, and the flare comes over, lands in front of the polar bear, and poof, explodes, and the polar bear runs off. But only once, it was flat ice. And as the flare came down, it bounced. It bounced over the head of the polar bear and exploded behind him, and the polar bear started running towards me. And I was like, so yeah, they're great, majestic animals. Okay, have we got time for a couple more minutes?
Yes.
Can anybody tell me what colour a polar bear is?
White.
Xavier.
Okay, white's a good colour. I like that because you would draw a white polar bear. Anybody else?
Whitney.
Isn't
Black. Who said black? Okay, if you shave a polar bear, don't shave a polar bear. If you shave a polar bear, it's black underneath because the skin is nice and black. And we've had white. Some people say cream. But an actual polar bear's hair, if you pluck the hair of a polar bear and look through a microscope, it's transparent. It's see-through. There's a hole going through the hair, and there's millions of hairs all over the body. And as the wind whips around, it gets trapped inside the hairs, like it would do in a down jacket. And it's one way that the polar bear keeps nice and warm, by trapping air within its fur. So,
Interesting.
wow. Wow.
You teach geography and science all in one day.
Wow, amazing.
I'm kind of losing you on this side. You've all frozen.
I said you teach geography and science all in one day.
I think we're losing him. So, okay, we'll need to wrap up. So,
I'm gonna have to wrap this up in a second. So
these students are going to move on to their next class today, too. So, we want to thank you for
Thank
your
you so
time today.
much.
What do you say?
Thank you.
Wait, guys,
Give
thank
them
you.
away.
Nice way. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
is it possible for your students to turn around and then one of the teachers, stand by the cameras and take a photograph of me with the students in front of me facing that way? Is that okay?
Sure.
I'll just do my
Okay, so you guys sit down. People in the back, you need to get on your knees because we need to see him as well.
This ball.
Okay? So grab your
I'm the one.
Bounce down, be careful with the table.
I'm the one.
You're all Come this way, guys.
Hey, don't pick your nose or anything.
Just to say, the screen is freezing every now and again on my side, so just let me know when you're ready, and I'll do this, okay?
We're ready when you are.
Thumbs up, everybody.
Thumbs up.
Oh, don't cover faces.
There you go.
Got it.
Perfect.
Nice. Good job.
One last thing. If you send me your address through an email, I'll send you some prints of our expedition signed by expedition team.
Thank you so much. We'll do that today.
I'm doing that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.